Admiral Senna Von of the Zentari Alliance stood before the Grand Council, her crystalline form dimming with exhaustion. The massive chamber, carved from living crystal deep within their homeworld's core, normally hummed with the collective consciousness of thousands of council members. Today, it was silent except for the occasional ping of emergency alerts from the surface. "The swarm has taken the Proxima sector," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of another devastating defeat. "We've lost contact with 60 billion citizens." The numbers were becoming routine, but the pain never lessened. The Grand Council's first speaker, Elder Jix, raised his primary sensory stalk. "How many systems remain?" 17, Senna replied, "down from the 312 we held at the start of the war." She didn't need to remind them that this conflict had raged for nearly 30 solar cycles. The swarm, a hive mind species that consumed all organic matter to fuel their endless expansion, had systematically destroyed everything in their path. The Zentari, despite their advanced technology and unified society, had failed to stop them. Their perfect formations, predictable strategies, and reliance on pure energy weapons had proved insufficient against an enemy that evolved with each encounter. The swarm's biological ships, capable of healing and adapting mid-battle, had rendered traditional warfare obsolete. "There may be an alternative," announced Council Member Reth, his usual diplomatic restraint wavering. "Our deep space sensors have detected a civilization in what we once considered the dead zone. They call themselves humans." The chamber erupted in murmurs. The dead zone was a sector of space deemed uninhabitable due to its extreme radiation levels, gravitational anomalies, and concentration of class death worlds. No spacefaring civilization had ever emerged from that region. "What makes these humans worthy of our attention?" Elder Jix asked, voicing the collective skepticism. Reth activated a holographic display in the chamber center. Images of Earth filled the space. Massive storms, active volcanoes, predatory creatures, and scenes of human history. They evolved on a class-death world they call Earth. Their planet should have killed them thousands of times over. Instead, they thrived. The display shifted to show human warfare through the ages. The Council watched in horrified fascination as the images progressed from ancient battles to modern conflicts. "They've spent their entire history fighting," Reth continued. "Not against external threats, but against themselves. They've developed warfare into an art form." "Barbaric," one council member whispered. "Perhaps," Senna interjected, her tactical mind racing with possibilities. "But they've demonstrated something we've never mastered: adaptability. Look at how their tactics evolved. They don't fight like we do, with perfect formations and predictable patterns. They're chaos incarnate." The display showed modern human military exercises, ships performing maneuvers that seemed suicidal, soldiers training in impossible conditions, and weapons that utilized principles the Zentari had never considered. "Their technology is primitive," Elder Jix noted, "barely capable of interstellar travel." "Their ships are primitive," Senna corrected. "But their weapons," she highlighted several examples. "They still use kinetic weapons, projectiles, explosives, things we abandoned millennia ago as inefficient, but against the swarm's biological ships." Understanding dawned across the Council. Energy weapons could be adapted to, absorbed, even redirected. But physical damage, especially from materials the swarm had never encountered, would be harder to evolve against. "There's more," Reth added. "They have something we've lost over our millennia of peace before the swarm. They understand sacrifice. They comprehend acceptable losses. They're willing to die for victory." The chamber fell silent again, but this time with contemplation rather than despair. The Zentari, with their connected consciousness and perfect unity, valued each life equally. The idea of sacrificing some for the greater good was alien to them. Yet against the swarm, perhaps this human perspective was exactly what they needed. "How do we approach them?" Elder Jix asked finally. They're primitive, violent, and isolated. Why would they help us? Senna's form brightened slightly, a sign of hope. Because that's another thing I've learned about humans. They have an inexplicable drive to prove themselves against impossible odds. They're drawn to challenges that any rational species would flee from. She paused. And they have a particular hatred for parasitic organisms that threaten free will. The council deliberated for 3 days, an unprecedented speed for such a momentous decision. In the end, they had no choice. The swarm was approaching their core worlds. Without a dramatic change, the Zentari civilization would fall within a solar cycle. Send the diplomatic mission, Elder Jix commanded. Offer them whatever they want. Technology, resources, territory. But make them understand what's at stake. Not just for us, but for all life in the galaxy. As Senna prepared the mission, she reviewed more human history. Their responses to existential threats were fascinating. They became more innovative, more determined, more unified in the face of overwhelming odds. She hoped the council was right. She hoped humans were as remarkable as they appeared. Because if they weren't, if this gamble failed, the Zentari Alliance would join the countless civilizations already consumed by the swarm. And after that, nothing would stop the tide of consumption from reaching Earth itself. The diplomatic ships departed the next day, their crystal hulls reflecting the light of 1,000 suns as they headed toward the dead zone, toward Earth, toward humanity, toward their last hope. General Sarah Chen stood in the United Earth Defense Force Command Center, studying the holographic display of the Zentari core worlds. 6 months had passed since first contact, and humanity's response had surprised even the optimistic Zentari diplomats. Instead of fear or hesitation, Earth's nations had unified with unprecedented speed, recognizing both the threat and the opportunity the swarm presented. Their ships are beautiful, Lieutenant Rodriguez commented, watching the crystalline Zentari vessels maneuver in perfect formation. Almost too beautiful for war. That's exactly their problem, Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the swirling mass of biological ships approaching the defensive line. The swarm vessels looked like massive insects crossed with deep-sea creatures, their organic hulls rippling with muscle and chitin. The Zentari fight like they build, with mathematical precision. The swarm adapts to patterns. They need chaos. The first human warships had shocked their alien allies, while Zentari vessels were elegant crystal spheres powered by pure energy. Human ships were angular, armored monstrosities that the aliens nicknamed space fortresses. They carried railguns, missile pods, and what the Zentari considered prehistoric nuclear weapons. Most importantly, they carried crews trained in Earth's most effective combat doctrine, asymmetric warfare. First wave deploying, Rodriguez announced. Operation Thunderstorm was about to begin, humanity's first major contribution to the war effort. The human fleet split into seemingly random groups, breaking every rule of space combat the Zentari had established over millennia. Small, fast ships darted forward, launching salvos of missiles that carried an Earth-made surprise. Biological weapons designed specifically for the swarm's organic ships. Status on the bioweapons, Sarah asked, watching the missiles streak across space. Initial results promising, her science officer reported. The engineered bacteria are attacking the swarm ship's outer membranes. They're trying to adapt, but Earth bacteria evolve faster than their healing response. The swarm's front line began to dissolve, literally, as the bacteria consumed their living hulls. But the hive mind was learning, already growing new layers of armor. That's when Phase 2 began. Launch the Wasps, Sarah commanded. The smallest human ships, barely large enough for 2 crew members, accelerated toward the gaps in the swarm's formation. Each carried a payload that would have been considered insane by Zentari standards. Antimatter bombs wrapped in conventional explosives. Zentari Command is requesting we recall the Wasps, Rodriguez reported. They're calculating a 97% casualty rate for those crews. Tell them that's why we call them suicide runs, Sarah replied grimly. The crews knew the odds when they volunteered. The wasps struck like their namesakes, diving into the wounds created by the bioweapons. Their conventional explosives scattered shrapnel throughout the swarm ship's internal organs, before the antimatter detonations created miniature suns that consumed everything within 1,000 kilometers. The swarm's hivemen reeled from the unprecedented attack. Their biological ships began firing wildly, abandoning their usual precise targeting. That's when the Zentari fleet, led by Admiral Senna, struck from multiple vectors, their energy weapons much more effective against the now disorganized enemy. Signal from Admiral Senna, Rodriguez announced. She's thanking us and requesting immediate deployment of additional human tactics. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Zentari were learning. Already, their formations were becoming less rigid, incorporating randomness into their movements. They were beginning to understand that perfection was a weakness in war. But the victory had come at a cost. 43 human crews had sacrificed themselves in the Wasp attacks. The bioweapons had consumed resources that could have fed millions. The Zentari, with their collective consciousness, felt every death as if it were their own. They couldn't understand how humans could willingly send soldiers to certain death. New swarm formations detected, the sensor officer reported. They're mimicking our attack patterns. Sarah's smile faded. The swarm was adapting faster than expected, learning from both their victories and defeats. The next battle would be harder. They would need new tactics, new weapons, new ways to introduce chaos into the equation. Send word to Earth, she ordered. Tell them to accelerate production of Project Phoenix and get me a direct line to the Zentari weapons development team. It's time they learned about something we call guerrilla warfare. As she watched the battlefield clear, Sarah thought about the history lessons she'd studied in military academy. Humanity had spent millennia fighting itself, developing countless ways to kill and survive. Now those same skills might save not just Earth, but all sentient life in the galaxy. The swarm thought it had perfected biological warfare, but they had never encountered Earth's pathogens, never faced a species that had survived countless plagues and evolved alongside microscopic killers. They had never met an enemy that turned their own adaptability against them. General, Rodriguez interrupted her thoughts. The Zentari Council is requesting your presence. They want to discuss implementing human training programs for their military. Sarah nodded. The Zentari were ancient, advanced, and wise. But they had forgotten something humans learned in their infancy. Survival requires more than perfection. It requires the willingness to embrace chaos, to sacrifice, to fight dirty when necessary. Tell them I'll be there shortly, she replied, and have the tactical team prepare a presentation on Earth's historical resistance movements. It's time the Zentari learned why humans are so dangerous when backed into a corner. The war was far from over. The swarm would adapt to these tactics, force them to innovate again. But for the first time since the conflict began, the Zentari Alliance had hope. They had found allies who didn't just understand warfare, they had mastered its darkest arts. And humanity, after millennia of fighting itself, was finally united against a common enemy. The stars themselves would tremble at what came next. Dr. Maya Patel watched through reinforced glass as the latest generation of swarm bioships arrived in the containment chamber. 3 months had passed since Operation Thunderstorm, and the enemy had evolved in ways that terrified even Earth's most experienced xenobiologists. They've incorporated our bacteria into their biology, she explained to the holographic projections of both human and Zentari military leadership. Not just developed immunity. They're actively using modified versions of our weapons. The specimen in the chamber had been captured during the Battle of Proxima I. Its hull was no longer purely chitinous. It now featured colonies of engineered bacteria that could break down enemy ships on contact. The swarm had taken humanity's innovation and twisted it into something even more deadly. How do they adapt so quickly? Admiral Senna's crystalline form flickered with concern. Even your Earth bacteria took millions of years to evolve. They've somehow merged their hive mind with bacterial collective intelligence, Maya replied. They're directing evolution at the molecular level. But that's not the worst part. She activated a deeper scan of the specimen. They're incorporating mechanical elements now. They saw our ship's armor and weapons, and they're learning to grow metal alloys within their organic matrix. General Chen's hologram leaned forward. They're becoming hybrids, biological and mechanical. Exactly. They're adapting not just to our weapons, but to our entire approach to warfare. They're learning from both humanity and the Zentari simultaneously. The implications were staggering. The swarm had always been pure biological entities, relying on evolution and numbers. Now they were becoming something new, something that combined the best aspects of both their allies' technologies. We've received reports from the Antares sector. Rodriguez added, his hologram flickering with static from the long-distance transmission. The swarm ships there have developed energy-absorbing organs similar to Zentari shields. They're learning too fast. Maya pulled up the latest battle footage. The new swarm ships moved with terrible grace, their hybrid forms allowing them to switch between biological and mechanical advantages at will. Traditional tactics were becoming useless as the enemy adapted to each new strategy within hours. But Maya smiled, catching both human and Zentari leadership off guard. "You look pleased, Doctor," General Chen observed. "Care to share why?" "Because they're playing our game now," Maya explained. "The swarm used to be pure biological evolution, natural, predictable in its unpredictability. Now they're trying to control it, direct it. They're thinking like us." "And that's good?" Admiral Senna asked. "It's perfect, because they're not just learning from our strengths, they're inheriting our weaknesses." Maya brought up new data streams. "Their hybrid ships are more powerful, yes, but they're also more vulnerable. The mechanical components can't heal like their biological parts. The metal alloys they're growing aren't as pure or well-structured as our manufactured ones. They're trading their perfect biological adaptation for immediate gains." Understanding dawned across the faces of the military leadership. The swarm, in its attempt to match its enemies, had compromised the very thing that made it so dangerous, its ability to evolve naturally and perfectly. "We've also noticed something else," Maya continued. "Their hive mind is struggling to control these new hybrid forms. They're developing individual traits, quirks in their programming. Some ships act independently of the collective. They're developing individuality," Admiral Senna whispered, her crystalline form brightening with hope. "Like a virus becoming less lethal as it adapts to its host." "Precisely. And that gives me an idea." Maya pulled up schematics for a new weapon system. "We've been fighting them like they're either purely biological or purely mechanical. But now that they're both, we can attack them at the interface between organic and artificial." The schematics showed a new type of missile, one that carried neither explosives nor traditional bioweapons. Instead, it contained something uniquely human, computer viruses combined with biological agents. "We call it Project Babel," Maya explained. "Named after the ancient story of a tower that fell when its builders could no longer communicate. These weapons won't just attack their ships, they'll attack the connection between their biological and mechanical systems, between their individual ships and the hive mind itself." The military leaders studied the proposal with growing interest. It was ambitious, combining the best of human computer science with Zentari crystal technology and Earth's biological warfare expertise. "How soon can you have a prototype?" General Chen asked. 2 weeks for the first tests. But we'll need volunteers, pilots willing to get close enough to directly interface with swarm ships. The delivery system is intimate. Intimate. Admiral Senna's form flickered with concern. The pilots will need to physically dock with swarm ships, establishing a connection that allows our virus to bypass their evolved defenses. It's a suicide mission. The chamber fell silent. The Zentari had finally grown accustomed to human sacrifice in battle, but this was different. This wasn't just asking soldiers to die. It was asking them to merge, however briefly, with the enemy. "I'll have a list of volunteers within the hour," General Chen said firmly. Humanity has faced plagues, predators, and our own worst impulses. We won't balk at this. Maya nodded, already preparing the laboratory for accelerated testing. The swarm thought it had mastered adaptation, had learned to control its evolution. But it was about to discover something humans had known since they first picked up stones as weapons. True adaptation wasn't about becoming stronger. It was about being willing to change everything about yourself to survive. Captain James Chen, son of General Sarah Chen, drifted in the wreckage of what had once been humanity's greatest fleet. His survival pod sensors showed the devastating aftermath of the swarm's counterattack. The shattered remains of both human and Centauri ships stretching across the Rigel sector. Project Babel had worked too well. When the virus disrupted the swarm's hive mind, it didn't just confuse them. It drove them insane. The hybrid ships, their biological and mechanical systems at war with each other, had launched a suicide attack that caught the Allied fleet completely off guard. "Anyone on this frequency," he broadcast, his oxygen running low. "This is Captain Chen of the EFSS Prometheus, requesting status update." Static crackled for several minutes before a familiar crystalline form materialized on his pod's small holoscreen. "Captain," Admiral Senna's voice carried none of its usual harmony. "We've confirmed your mother's last transmission. The swarm, they've broken through to the Sol system." James closed his eyes, fighting back tears in zero gravity. Earth's defense fleet had been here, trying to stop the swarm's main force. They couldn't have known it was a diversion. How bad? "The Luna shipyards are gone. Mars colony has gone dark. Earth's orbital defenses are holding. But," she paused, "the swarm is using our own tactics against us. They're sacrificing ships to overwhelm the defenses through sheer numbers." A bitter laugh escaped James's lips. They had taught the perfect organism how to be human, and now humanity was paying the price. The swarm had learned sacrifice, learned chaos, learned how to bypass billions of years of evolution with mechanical shortcuts. "What about Project Phoenix?" he asked, referring to the classified operation his mother had hinted at during their last conversation. "That's why I'm contacting you specifically." Senna's form flickered. "Before the attack, your mother transmitted command codes to your neural implant. You're now authorized for Phase Omega of Phoenix." James's hand instinctively went to the back of his neck, where the quantum processor connected directly to his brainstem. All senior officers had them. They were necessary to interface with the more advanced Centauri systems, but he had never received any special codes. "I don't understand," he started, but suddenly his implant activated on its own. Information flooded his consciousness, schematics, protocols, and a truth so terrible it took his breath away. "No," he whispered. "This can't be what she planned." It's exactly what humanity does best," Senna interrupted. "You take something meant for one purpose and turn it into something else, just like the swarm did with our weapons." The plan unfolded in James's mind with crystal clarity. Project Phoenix wasn't a weapon or a defense system. It was a virus, but not like Babel. This one was designed to infect human neural implants, transforming their quantum processors into nodes of a new kind of hive mind. "We would become what we're fighting," he protested. "No," Senna corrected. "You would become something new, something that combines human individuality with swarm-like collective consciousness. Your mother called it guided evolution, humanity's next step, accelerated by necessity." James watched through his pod's viewport as more swarm ships emerged from hyperspace, heading toward Earth. They moved with horrible efficiency now, having learned formation flying from the Centauri, while maintaining their biological adaptability. "How many officers have implants?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Enough," Senna replied. "Enough to form a collective consciousness that could match the swarm's hive mind, but with human creativity and Centauri technology." Your mother believed that true victory wasn't about destroying the enemy, but about transcending them. The codes in James's implant began to resonate, reaching out to others nearby. He could feel them. other survivors in pods and damaged ships, their own implants awakening. Each consciousness remained distinct, but they were becoming part of something larger. "The swarm thinks it learned everything about us," James said, his voice overlapping with others as the connection grew stronger. "But they never understood our most fundamental trait. Humans don't just adapt, we transform." Through the growing network of minds, he could see the full scope of his mother's plan. The neural implants weren't just processors, they contained synthetic versions of the bacteria that made the swarm so adaptable. Humanity would fight the enemy with its own weapons, but guided by human consciousness and enhanced by Centauri crystal technology. "We're detecting quantum signature changes in your region," Senna reported. "The transformation is beginning. Are you still you?" James smiled as he felt his consciousness expand, touching others while remaining uniquely his own. "I'm still me," he replied. "We're all still ourselves, but we're also something more." Around him, the wreckage of human and Centauri ships began to move, drawn together by the combined will of the connected officers. Their neural implants interfaced with the ship's systems, forcing them to merge and transform just as the swarm had done. But this was different. This wasn't mindless adaptation or forced evolution. This was humanity doing what it had always done, taking its greatest crisis and turning it into its next great leap forward. "Send word to Earth," James commanded, his voice now carrying the weight of countless others. "Tell them to prepare for our arrival." The swarm thought it had mastered evolution. He watched as the merged ships formed something new, something that was neither purely organic nor mechanical, but a perfect synthesis of both. "Let's show them what real evolution looks like." Earth burned. From his position in the transformed fleet, James Chen watched through countless sensors as the swarm laid siege to his homeworld. The orbital defense platforms, humanity's pride and strongest shields, fell one by one as hybrid ships sacrificed themselves in waves of destructive fury. But Earth wasn't defenseless. The planet that had birthed humanity had one final card to play. "All Phoenix nodes, prepare for synchronization," James commanded. His consciousness expanded through the neural network that now connected thousands of officers. Their merged minds guided ships that had ceased to be merely vessels, becoming extensions of human will enhanced by Centauri crystal technology. "The transformation is complete," Admiral Senna reported from her position within the Centauri fleet. "But James, the changes we're detecting in your ships, in your people." "We're still human," he assured her, though he knew that definition was becoming more fluid by the moment. The synthetic bacteria from their neural implants had spread throughout their ships, creating a new kind of hybrid, one born of choice rather than blind evolution. Through the network, he felt every officer's determination, their fear, their hope. Unlike the swarm's hive mind, which suppressed individuality, the Phoenix network amplified it. Each consciousness contributed its unique perspective to create something greater than the sum of its parts. "Swarm ships are adapting to our presence," reported Captain Maria Rodriguez, her thoughts flowing seamlessly through the network. "They sense something familiar in us." James watched as the enemy vessels paused in their assault on Earth, their hybrid forms twisting as they analyzed the transformed human fleet. The swarm had learned to think like humans, to adapt like humans, but they had never understood what truly made humanity dangerous. It wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It wasn't even their ability to adapt. It was their ability to choose their own evolution. "All ships, execute Operation Synthesis," James commanded. The transformed fleet moved as one, but with the complexity of thousands of individual minds working in perfect concert. Their ships, now more organism than machine, reached out with tendrils of crystalline energy toward the swarm. "They're trying to merge with us," Rodriguez observed as the swarm ships responded, extending their own hybrid appendages, just as we planned. The space around Earth became a twisted dance of light and matter as the two forces met. But while the swarm sought to absorb and consume, the human fleet had a different purpose. Through their neural network, they transmitted not just energy or matter, but something the swarm had never encountered: choice. "We're offering them freedom," James broadcast on all frequencies, knowing the hive mind would understand. The ability to be individuals while remaining connected. Evolution by choice, not necessity. The swarm's response was chaos. Some ships retreated, their hive mind connection fracturing as the concept of individual choice infected their network. Others attacked with renewed fury, instinctively fighting against the threat to their unity. But a third group, led by the most evolved hybrid ships, began to change. Dr. Maya Patel's voice joined the network from her laboratory beneath the lunar ruins. "It's working. The synthetic bacteria we encoded with human consciousness patterns, they're rewriting the swarm's neural architecture, giving them the ability to choose their own path." Through the Phoenix network, James felt the moment the first swarm ship made a choice, a real choice, not driven by evolution or hive mind imperatives. It was like watching a light switch on in darkness, a spark of individual consciousness emerging from the collective. Then another, and another. But victory came with a price. The human officers connected to the Phoenix network were changing too. Their consciousness expanded beyond normal human limits, their bodies adapted by the same synthetic bacteria that were transforming the swarm. They were becoming something new, a bridge between individual and collective existence. "The swarm fleet is retreating," Admiral Senna announced, her crystalline form vibrating with emotion. "Those that haven't been transformed are falling back to deep space." James watched through enhanced senses as nearly a third of the swarm ships remained, their forms shifting as individual consciousness bloomed within them. The hive mind that had threatened the galaxy was fracturing, replaced by a new kind of collective, one that preserved and celebrated individual choice. "What have we become?" Rodriguez asked through the network, her thoughts tinged with wonder and fear. "What we chose to become," James replied. "We could have fought the swarm until one side was extinct. Instead, we showed them a better way. We proved that true strength isn't in domination or perfect adaptation, but in the power to choose who and what you want to be." Earth still burned in places, its orbital defenses in ruins. The transformed human officers would never be quite human again. The galaxy itself had changed, with 3 distinct species, Centauri, transformed humans, and conscious swarm, now facing an uncertain future together. But as James looked upon his homeworld through evolved senses, he felt not loss but hope. Humanity had faced its greatest threat not by destroying it, but by transforming it, and themselves, into something better. "Send word to all colonies, all ships," he commanded. "The war is over, not through victory or defeat, but through transcendence." The Phoenix network hummed with collective agreement, each mind distinct yet harmoniously connected. They had taught the swarm that true evolution wasn't about becoming stronger or more perfect. It was about becoming wiser. Around Earth, the transformed ships began the work of reconstruction, their hybrid forms perfectly suited to repair both mechanical and biological damage. Former swarm vessels worked alongside them, each now guided by an individual consciousness while remaining part of a greater whole. Humanity had reached for the stars and found monsters. But in true human fashion, they hadn't just fought the monsters. They had shown them how to be more than their nature dictated. They had proven that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't evolution, or adaptation, or even intelligence. It was choice. The power to choose what you become, even if that choice leads you to become something entirely new. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter as Earth began its recovery, watching as 3 species embarked on a new journey, not of conquest or survival, but of conscious evolution toward something greater than any of them could have become alone.